Welcome on in, everybody. It is Fighters Fury here on 790 The Ticket. Tobin here with you as the next hour we'll dive all over the world of mixed martial arts and boxing. Also get some bare knuckle fighting in as well, as I was at the BKFC 14 show at the Intercontinental in Miami. So I'll tell you about my experiences there, but I want to start off with last night's boxing card on ESPN. You had Terence Crawford defending his WBO welterweight title against Kell Brook. Great sensational fourth round knockout from Terence Crawford. Caught Kell Brook coming in, hit him with a nasty jab that really just rattled his brain, sent him to the back of the ropes. Followed it up a little bit more before Tony Weeks could get to him to call it a knockdown for the ropes, holding up Kell Brook. And once he made the standing 8 count, it didn't last much longer after that. Kell Brook looked pretty decent in the early goings of that fight. Terence started off the fight right-handed. He went for the conventional style before switching up to southpaw and really doing the damage like he did. But Kell looked in great shape. He was doing some things with his lead hand, with his jab. A couple 1-2s up top. We're doing well, and then. The other thing was he was pretty accurate with the shots that he was picking. Nothing that was earth-shattering, and I would say he was doing more of frustrating Terence really than inflicting any kind of damage. It wasn't like he was imposing his will as the naturally bigger guy in this fight. So I wasn't, hitting the panic mode, even if people, were really impressed with how ahead Kell Brook may have been early goings. I thought Terence Crawford was in a good spot for that. And he was, he was a guy where he felt like he was going to be able to pick his spots. And I do think that after watching the way Spence, the way that Kell Brook was stopped, you could probably question on how in shape that head is still with the 2 broken orbital bones, just taking a shot like that. He didn't take it well. And so Terence Crawford retains his title. He remains undefeated. He is going to, I imagine, stay atop many people's pound-for-pound rankings. Debated how you want to. Look, I've been on the Terence Crawford bandwagon for a long time. For my mind, he has been the best welterweight on the planet to me. And so I didn't need to see anything tonight that really would solidify that for me. I suppose he could have had a performance that would have had to make me question where he was if it was a bad performance because of the layoff, because of the age, any of that type of stuff. But I think tonight he did a good job in solidifying wherever he was in anybody's mind. Did he do anything to convince anybody? If anybody thinks, if you're an Errol Spence guy, if you think Errol Spence is the better welterweight, did he do anything tonight that would have convinced you otherwise? Probably not. You're probably going to call Kell Brook washed, damaged goods, all that type of stuff. And that's why, we need to see these two guys fight each other. I was disappointed in the aftermath of the fight that you had Bob Arum there. I was expecting some kind of big announcement, which I suppose we got from them because they really swerved from Errol Spence pretty quickly. They put all talks of Errol Spence away, and Terence Crawford made it known that he wants to fight Manny Pacquiao. That is the opponent that he's looking for. He wants the big payday. I get that. I'm a little surprised that Manny Pacquiao is going to be on board with fighting Terence Crawford. They said that they were close to getting it done. I guess in Qatar, the reports were that they were close to doing it before the shutdown happened, and so maybe they're going to revisit that. Look, it's a fun fight. Don't get me wrong. First of all, Manny Pacquiao is one of my favorite fighters of all time, so I am, of course, going to be into a fight where Terence Crawford and Manny Pacquiao, 2 welterweight kings from essentially different eras, are going to square off, and we're going to be able to find out who the man is, who is the guy out of these two. Manny does have a WBA title from his win over Keith Thurman. So I don't think it's unwarranted that Manny Pacquiao gets a crack at Terence Crawford. I don't think that he is undeserving of fighting Terence Crawford. I think with his win over Keith Thurman, he certainly is worthy of getting that shot or worthy of getting to fight for a title, even at his age. The question is, though, when are we going to get out of this era of Manny Pacquiao / Floyd Mayweather? We're starting to put the Mayweather stuff behind us. And I really felt with Manny like that Keith Thurman fight was just such the cherry on top of his career. Like he could have just gone out like that. It's not to say that he can't beat Terence Crawford. It's just like, well, what else do you have to do? And that's why I didn't have any issue with Manny searching out a Conor McGregor fight or anything in that regard, a super fight, because he's done it all. He's fought them all. He's been there. He's done that. He's fought trilogies, rivalries, super fights, all that type of stuff. Guys who are way bigger than him. He's taken on every obstacle there is to take on. And so for this last one, for this next one to beat Terence Crawford, or, even if you want to put Errol Spence in that camp too, because he certainly hasn't been shy about trying to get Manny Pacquiao. They've both in recent wins have called out Manny Pacquiao rather than each other. And I just think of this, like, for Terence, he is a prize fighter, and ultimately the guy wants to make a ton of money. I get it. So he's the reward here is money. Is it legacy? It feels like a no-win situation for him if he fights Manny Pacquiao. Now, I would say if you're Terence Crawford's camp, your probably argument is, well, I mean, we're already in a no-win situation unless we fight Errol Spence. If they truly believe that fight can't happen, there really isn't an opponent out there, I think, that Terence can take on right now that's not in, if it's not Errol Spence or anybody in the PBC ranking. I don't know if there's a guy where he could even get a ton of credit for fighting, even if, Keith Thurman would have jumped ship. People think Keith Thurman's damaged goods. He just lost to Manny Pacquiao. So I don't know who that guy is that he could take on and people would be like, all right, Terence Crawford solidified himself as a man. Like, we want to see them fight each other. You're going to have this fight come up in December between Errol Spence and Danny Garcia. And, the question will come out of that of like, who is the guy out of that? And look, the thing I'll give credit for with ESPN tonight is, they didn't duck around it. They didn't make it seem like it's Terence and there is no Errol Spence, And I can say on the other side with PBC, they've done the complete opposite. Like, they've ignored Terence Crawford. They've gone in the realm of saying, Manny's the man, Sean Porter's the guy, Keith Thurman's the guy, their whole little universe. And they just act like Terence Crawford isn't a thing. At least ESPN is giving you the acknowledgement, okay, we know that Terence Crawford, that's our guy. And we regard him as number one, and Andre Ward's going to tell you why he's number one. But at least they acknowledge, hey, there's this other guy out there who could have a claim at the throne. He's the unified champ right now, 147. He's got a big slice of the pie. We don't ignore it. So I appreciate that from them. That the thing that sucks about it, though, is you feel like your hopes of it were squashed immediately because Bob Arum's like, yeah, well, Errol Spence is going to duck him and Terence Crawford is better. And, I don't know. Like, if you really were to put it up to a poll right now, if I were to ask people tonight, like, who would you rather, if I could make the fight happen, and if I could make it for the same money, if I could make, if I could make Errol Spence and Manny Pacquiao and Terence Crawford, they all make the same amount of money. And especially for the young guys, like if I could say, hey, you'll make, let's say 15 million fighting Manny Pacquiao, or you'll make 15 million fighting Errol Spence, samesies. And I know that's not going to be the case, but let's just say it was. Who would you rather fight? And I would hope it would be the young guy. I would hope it would be the guy who other people possibly regard as the best. I don't think Manny Pacquiao is regarded as the best. And look, I don't rule Manny Pacquiao out of a fight with Terence Crawford. or Errol Spence, he's the man. Like, Manny Pacquiao is an absolute monster. He's good. He's done more in 2 careers than those guys have in their 1. But at some point, you got to wonder, how much can you expect an old legend to beat young lions? You know, he got Keith Thurman. Keith Thurman was coming off some injuries. He's a guy who's had really bad hand issues. You know, we've had a couple interviews with Keith. You know, he's admitted to me, like, he's not one time anymore. You know, he's a guy who's figuring out how to try and reinvent his career. And he's trying to beat Manny Pacquiao while doing it. Like, it's not a great recipe for success. With Terence, even though he's 33, he does not look like he's diminishing at all. He looks like he's probably got another 3-4 years of this prime left, but you don't want it to be on the tail end. And then with Errol, like, look, man, this guy just walked away from a crazy accident. And, you know, you're wondering, like, all right, well, what's going to really prove that he's the guy? Look, he's got some great things going for him. You know, I was at that Mikey Garcia fight that did really good business-wise. People were into it. He felt like a star. And he showed me a lot of stuff, too. I mean, like, you know, it was one of these things where I picked Mikey Garcia in that fight, thinking that he was the better boxer, that he doesn't make any mistakes. He's flawless. I knew that he was the smaller guy, but I really took for granted Errol Spence's ability to outbox him. And Errol Spence boxed his socks off. Like, he was tremendous. I think he proved a lot of stuff to everybody that night. I think that even with that, even seeing that ringside, I still think Terence Crawford has a few more bags in his tricks in his bag, that I would pick Terence Crawford in a matchup with those two. But what's disappointing to me is knowing that money is an important element to this and that they are prize fighters. And that's great. But eventually this welterweight division has to do what the heavyweight division is doing. It would be like right now, not quite to this degree, but pretty close. It would be like Tyson Fury going out there right now and calling out Mike Tyson after his Roy Jones fight. Like, oh, okay, well, what does that prove? Now, to Tyson Fury's credit, like, all right, he's even done some more proving. He's fought guys of his era and fought of the past era. You know, 2 of those guys have gotten to fight Vladimir Klitschko. But eventually this welterweight division has to move on. You know, the thing that is frustrating about it is this has been the glamour division, but they can't get out of the shadow of Floyd and Manny. They can't. And it took for years, the heavyweight division, it took years upon years of them to get out of the shadow of Lennox and Holyfield and Tyson. It took them years. I don't really consider the Vladimir Klitschko era a time where they were out of the shadow. That felt like the shadow got even bigger because people were bored by Klitschko's reign. So it's just extremely frustrating that these young cats who seemingly are the best in the world and really don't have great excuses not to fight each other, especially after we just saw PBC and ESPN cross blend over. There's really not a great reason for it. You know, and Terence Crawford may walk in this room and say, hey, shut up. This is the once in a lifetime opportunity to fight Manny Pacquiao. I'm like, okay, that's great. But just know that if you obliterate him, it's going to mean for your boxing legacy, it's not going to mean anything. You're going to be super rich. Hopefully. But just know that, like, he's not going to get any credit for that win. Or Spence, if Spence were to fight Manny. You know, it's the weird spot where Manny's got the bigger name, but he's got nothing to lose in those fights. Nothing to lose. I mean, I suppose other than suffering a vicious knockout loss, but I mean, like, legacy-wise, he's locked tight. He's set. Because I don't think anybody thinks that Manny's going to win those fights. I don't rule him out completely, but let's be honest. Like, people would think, oh, he's over the hill. He's taking on two guys who are in the absolute peak of their powers. And again, Terrence's answer to that might be, if I were to sit down and do an interview with him right now, and I've never got a chance to talk to Bud, but if I did, I'm sure his argument to me would be like, well, nobody gives me credit anyway, so what's the difference? But I just think that at certain points, a division, it becomes so obvious as to what you should do. It has to be done. And boxing messes around with this so much. And even heavyweight hasn't gotten it perfect, because let's be honest, before the Tyson Fury thing came along, we all wanted to see Manny versus AJ. I mean, Deontay versus AJ, and it didn't happen. So I hope they don't mess this up. Because once this goes down with Errol and he fights Danny Garcia, they're talking about doing Terence Crawford in the spring. You know, it doesn't seem like they're going to be very on very lined up schedules, when right now they quite actually are. You know, they are pretty lined up. They're fighting a few weeks apart. And you could set something up for summer, and it seems like it would be perfect for them to match up with one another. You know, with all respect to Danny Garcia, thinking that Errol Spence is going to take care of DSG, you know. So great performance by Terence tonight. You know, he beat Kell Brook way worse than Errol Spence did, but, you know, beat him down the line after, you know, Kell has been put together again a couple times. That being said, look, in my mind, he was already the number one welterweight. Tonight just solidifies it. And my hope is that it ends up with him taking on Errol Spence. It seems like they're leaning towards they want that next fight to be against Manny Pacquiao, which is a little disappointing. I'm still going to watch. I'd be excited to watch Terence Crawford versus Manny Pacquiao. Like I said, Manny's one of my favorite fighters of all time. I watch every fight that he's in. I buy every fight that he's on. Getting to go see him fight live was one of the sporting thrills of my life. But what's the point? Like, what are we doing here? You know, you are one of the best. You have a welterweight belt. You have a welterweight belt. Boom. Should be as easy as can be. But for some reason, it's not.